if you remember, in summer 2024, before the election, when Project 2025 began to get attention, people like me read Project 2025 and said this is a Christian nationalist fantasy about destroying the modern US government and replacing it with a theocracy. And when people started to learn about Project 2025, um, the polls said that only about 4% of Americans wanted it to go into place. Well, of course, and in fact, the when people talked about Project 2025, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump said, I have nothing to do with that. I got nothing to do with it. I don't know about it. And they fired one of the key people who had said he was working with Trump. And the legacy media picked that up, and both sides the issues. Oh, well, when at one point there's a famous video now where interview now where Harris said Project 2025, and the interviewer said, Trump says he's not part of that. And Harris is like, come on. Well, now we know that he is, in fact, putting that into place. The people around him are putting it into place. But that being said, he hasn't publicly admitted it yet. Today, he publicly admitted it. There's the great Russell Vought, who's part of Project 2025. And that is not going to make it any more popular to link the government shutdown to Project 2025 and basically openly admitting that Trump lied. All right, so if you listen to the people around Trump right now, look at the fact that he's saying this off the wall stuff in public, posting deep fakes that are deeply offensive, admitting that he was in on Project 2025. I mean, he's really kind of self-destructing. But watch JD Vance, because the next person in line, if Trump goes somewhere, is JD Vance. And JD Vance is a master of knifing somebody in the back while pretending to be on their side. So he was asked in public, again, he's the face of the administration these last couple days, about Trump's deep fakes and altered videos that he is posting about people like Hakeem Jeffries. And he could have passed it off quickly. Instead, he dug in a way that made Trump look really bad by saying, it's funny. This is funny that he's doing this, and this is a way to lighten up, and really spent some time implying that Trump was not recognizing the gravity of a government shutdown, which is a very grave thing. And then there is circulating a clip of House Speaker Mike Johnson being confronted by a Democratic lawmaker who's like, and I'm not quoting, dude, your president is unhinged. We got a real problem here. And Johnson said, you have people on your side, and again, this is not a quote, you have people like that too. Also, listen to that. In fact, the Democrats do not have people in the presidency or even high up in their ranks who are unhinged and have that kind of power. But Johnson didn't say he's fine. He said, you have people like that too, saying, yeah, I know he's crazy. And then he said, I didn't watch the speech, which is unbelievable. This is one of the most important events in his tenure, right? That all these military leaders have been called back to Washington. And he says he didn't watch the speech. It doesn't pass the smell test. Even if you didn't watch it, you should have read it. And they're clearly trying to get away from this, but they're not getting away from it in such a way that they are supporting Trump anymore. And today, the Politico reported that a number of Republicans are really nervous about what the administration is doing with its very clear claims to be hitting Democrats during this shutdown through things like ending the funding for infrastructure projects in New York City, which is badly going to hurt Republicans in the state of New York, not just the Democrats who are who voted against the continuing resolution. So, for all that there is this real power grab going on, there is also, I think, a really unstable underground to it, an unstable feeling about the president. And you have seen it with open calls from people like J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, to invoke the 25th Amendment. Now, don't hold your breath on that one, but this is not a stable situation. This is not a rising dictatorship that has everything in its control by any stretch of the imagination. It's not to say they're not doing dangerous, damaging things, but to recognize that there is also this real instability within the administration. That's about as much time as I have on that, because I want to go to the next point that people asked about and that is important to make, and that is, somebody said, "How come everything is illegal, but there's nothing we can do about it?" And first of all, we are doing things about it. But second of all, I got to put the blame here where it belongs, and that is on Trump's Republican enablers. The system was set up for especially the Senate, to care more about the country than they do about their party. And Donald Trump should have been convicted of the charges on which he was impeached in 2020 and again in 2021. And they let him go because they wanted to have partisan advantage. They could shut this down whenever they wanted to. And the huge irony of this is that if the Republicans really began to jump ship, the people who do that would build themselves extraordinary careers and places in the history books. So far, they are refusing to do it, and it is an extraordinary dereliction of duty that I feel very keenly, because they are destroying our system of government. So we're not able to count on them, which is where the framers of the Constitution put the responsibility for protecting Americans against the rise of a dictator. They're punting. They're refusing to do it. They're waiting for somebody to take over. This is absolutely inexcusable. I'm sorry, speaking of taking a look at the longer pattern of history here, this is the one in this moment that really jumps out. But if senators in Congress and representatives in Congress are refusing to act, the courts are holding. The lower courts are holding, not the Supreme Court, but the lower courts are holding, and they're pushing back, and they're stopping the administration in every possible different way. And that matters because it slows the march of authoritarianism. It makes it more difficult. It muddies the waters in really important ways. And that matters. And the lawyers who are standing against them matter. But so too do Americans who are standing up against the suppression of free speech, for example. The reinstatement of Jimmy Kimmel into his show Jimmy Kimmel Live mattered, because what it said was that the administration cannot simply stifle language that it doesn't want. And crucially, even though Sinclair and I think it was Nexstar tried to suppress Jimmy Kimmel's show from local channels, what individuals did was they watched those shows, figured out who the advertisers were on them, and called them and said they were going to boycott. That forced those private organizations, those companies, I'm sorry, to back down. And that was a real triumph. It was a real triumph because it illustrated that this march toward authoritarianism is not going to go unchallenged. And the people who are doing that, speaking up and pushing back, are really important in this moment.